Hi friends, welcome back. Today we are making Oajan by Parfums de Marly. This fragrance was released in 2013. I can't believe it's been 10 years since this was released. I can't find who the perfumer is or who the perfumer was. So if you happen to know, please put that in the comments, share with the class. Now this formula comes from a Basenotes user that I'm going to highlight for the next few episodes. The username is db.s. And this user, whoever he or she is, I think does a pretty good job of analyzing GCMS reports and then putting together formulas, relatively concise formulas based on those analyses. Again, for the next few episodes, I'm going to highlight some of these formulas. I'll put a link to the Basenotes forum post where I found this formula. And what I appreciate about this user is that they make notes as to why certain decisions were made. Sometimes those decisions are literally, why not? You know, I put in some of this because why not? So, you know, you can take it with a grain of salt. Now remember, the fragrance we make today is not going to be exactly like Oajan from Parfums de Marly. This truly is a type formula. Even if we had the exact formula that Parfums de Marly or whoever the manufacturer is for this perfume, we can't even make that because we don't have the explicit materials. You know, we just don't have all the things. It's not going to happen. However, that doesn't mean we can't get close. So, looking at the pyramid of this fragrance, most of this is in base notes. We have some in top notes, you know, that'll be our bergamot and our linalool acetate. Ooh, my tongue's getting tied today. But we have a fair bit in woody amber notes, particularly ISO E Super. 36% of this formula is in ISO E Super. Then we have a fair bit of sweet notes. And if you've smelled Oajan, you know this is a sweet, honey, spicy, gorgeous, gorgeous, elegant fragrance. We have lots of musks, lots of sweet notes. And interestingly, in this formula, I'm going to be using Osmanthus Absolute and Divana. I'm not sure I've used either of those yet. So, really looking forward to using these. So why don't we get started? First, we're going to start with our base. Now, what I'm making here is roughly 8 grams. The ending concentrate will be 17.7%. 17.7%. I chose this because this is the concentrate that keeps this particular formula at IFRA compliance. The material in question is coumarin. Coumarin is maxed out at 1.5% of the end in the final product. So we're probably going to be a little bit over that coumarin mark because we have tonka bean absolute in this formula as well. But why don't we start with our coumarin? We're talking about coumarin. Let's just start with our coumarin. There's a fair bit of coumarin in here. About 8.5% of the concentrate is in coumarin. And I love this material because it takes a sweet note like vanillin and it livens it up. It gives it a bit more brightness, a bit more top, but that top lasts. That brightness lasts. And it's sweet. Wrong cap. Whoops. All right. Next, let's do our vanillin. No. I'm sorry. Let's continue with our coumarin materials and let's do our tonka bean. I've got some tonka bean absolute. Coumarin is the odorous principle of tonka bean absolute. I believe just about half of tonka bean absolute is in coumarin. Okay, next up, we have a little bit of ethyl maltol. Ethyl maltol is still sweet, but it might be a bit darker, might be a bit more burnt. And to me, it has a slightly powderiness to it. I used to have this diluted at 5%, and I can't remember why. But recently, I had to make a new dilution, and it's much easier if you're working in a base 10 in factors of 10. So I changed it to a 10% dilution. Okay, next up we have vanillin. And there's a fair bit of vanillin in here, about 5% of the concentrate. Now vanillin can be quite strong. Sometimes you don't need much to sweeten up a formula or soften a formula. It works very well in combination with cumin, also with ethyl vanillin, and of course with ethyl maltol. And you know what? You mix in a little hedione and bergamot, and that alone could be a very pretty fragrance, very nice fragrance. It would be wonky because that bergamot might die off quickly, and it would be, it might feel a little empty, but just right off the strip, right after you dip that, it does smell pretty good. Next up, we're going to move into more base notes, but more on the balsamic side. We're going to start with cinnamic alcohol. Now, to me, this is a rich, very balsamic, very heavy material. If cinnamic alcohol was in a choir, it would be the bass. You'd be singing bass. It's got a low hum to it. Okay, thank you, cinnamic alcohol. Next up, cinile acetate. Interestingly, also a base note, at least I have it classified as a base note. Now, it is similar to cinnamic alcohol, but like most acetates, it has that acetate nature, meaning it might come off as a little sweet. Okay. We are trucking. We've got 4 more materials. We're going to save the big boys for last. But next up, let's move to patchouli. There's almost 5% of the concentrate in patchouli. Now, patchouli, I absolutely love because it is a base note. It lasts for such a long time. And it really helps to give body and breadth to a fragrance, to a formula. I'd say in a very similar way that rose or rose materials like citronellol, phenyl ethyl alcohol, geraniol, nerol, those materials help fill out the core of the fragrance. Just gives it body. Even fragrances where you feel like you can't smell rose per se, it probably has some of those rose materials in there because it is so effective at giving the fragrance some body. And I feel like patchouli is like that for the base of the pyramid. Patchouli, I think, is quite handy for that. Also, it gives a little bit of a chocolatiness to fragrances. Now, next up, we have Scentolide. This is a Cinnarome product that is like Ambrin. If you don't have Scentolide, don't sweat. Just use yourself some Ambrin. Okay. We've got 2 more. Then we're going to shake, rattle, and roll. By that I mean we're going to shake, dip, and let that rest. Next up, galaxolide. I'm using galaxolide 50 because most of the materials I'm using are at a 10% dilution, yet my final product will be at a 17.7% dilution. I need something with a bit more concentrate to, to increase our concentrate from 10 to 17. Galaxolide 50 is one way to do that. We'll be using galaxolide 50, Ionone 50, and ISO-E Super Neat. But let's get our galaxolide done. 22% of the concentrate is in galaxolide. Such a ubiquitous material. For good reason. It's clean, it's warm, it's musky. It gives body. It gives us something to smell that just smells good. Now, next up and finally in this cohort of ingredients, ISO-E Super. I've yet to play around a lot with timber silk and sylvamber. That bright ambery edge that I smell in ISO-E Super is more apparent in timber silk, and it is even more apparent in sylvamber. And again, those are all essentially the same material, but the ratio of isomers is simply different. That one molecule facing in a different direction, flipped upside down, that is a stereoisomer. Same molecule, just maybe a mirror image of its brother or sister molecule. Okay, I've already got a scent strip written out. This is the base, because we're all about that base. I'm all about that base, about that base. So let's dip and let's continue. We're going to continue with base notes. We're going to move into the ambers with 2 exceptions. We're adding muscanone, which is animalic. It's definitely a musk. I wanted to smell that with the slightly more animalic notes that we have in the labdanum and the ambrin. The other oddball is whiskey lactone. Now, whiskey lactone is a wonderful material. It is lactonic. It's a little bit boozy. It also has a celery note in it. Let's start with whiskey lactone. Now, I have been using a lot of whiskey lactone. I'm working on a fragrance that has multiple boozy notes. We've got whiskey lactone, cognac, and rum. And it's coming along nicely, but that celery note that is in whiskey lactone is very apparent between minutes 5 and minute 30. Between 5 and 30 minutes, celery is just a strong note in this fragrance that I'm making. So just iterating and trying to hide that, because otherwise it's a pretty nice fragrance. Next up, Cashmir. Cashmir, a nice ambery musk. I think it's metallic. I don't know if other people classify it as metallic, but that metallicness that I get from, say, linalool acetate, I get that same kind of vibe here in Cashmir. Cashmir is great when you combine it with some of the super ambers. If your fragrance is missing a little punch, Cashmir can come to the rescue. Let's add our final musk, our Musone Delta. Now, there's a fair bit of muscanone in here. And I love muscanone. It's soft, but it is animalic. But it's animalic in a very beautiful way. Okay. believe muscanone. It's either muscone or perhaps it's both. But this molecule is found in Tonkin deer musk, which is now banned for use because of the endangered deer population. I don't know if it's still endangered, but when you use parts of the deer for perfumery and it sells for a lot, well, then you have a recipe for trouble with endangered species. Next up, let's do our Ambrin. Okay. Ambrin. This is a Labdanum product. I know IFF makes an Ambrin, Biolandis. I need to figure out how to smell. I figure out how to smell that. I need to figure out how to smell that one. How to say that one, Bioland. But they spell them differently. It's kind of the same product. I don't know exactly how it's made, what separates it. Maybe it's a name brand for Labdanum Absolute. I really don't know. But I know if you don't have this, use Labdanum Absolute. No biggie. And there's a very little amount of Ambrin in here. So it's a beautiful color. It's a beautiful smell. I mean, Lord, it's wonderful. It is, to my nose, a little bit richer, maybe even a little bit smokier, more elegant than a run-of-the-mill Labdanum Absolute. But again, if you don't have it, you'll be fine with Labdanum Absolute. In fact, here's Labdanum Absolute. We're going to use this stuff. This I got from the perfumery. I've got a whole lot of it in my closet. I should say my storage. That sounds more, sounds better. It's not my closet. It's in my storage facility. And this is a pourable Labdanum. Not sure how they do it. I know they add in something, but it's a little less full, little less rich than some of the other Labdanum Absolutes I've had, but it is only marginally so. It works for me, especially for just a little bit of filler. You know, I think it works great. Last but not least, Ambroxan. This is the OG Ambroxan from Kao, K-A-O. When I open the tub of this, I get this beautiful, warm, just a wonderful smell that comes out of the bin. A smell that I do not get when I open up, say, Ambrox Super or Orchinox. Interesting. Not sure why that is. Maybe it's because those other bins are just a little bit smaller. There's not much air wafting over it to come to my nose. Not entirely sure, but I do enjoy opening up my tub of Ambroxan just because I can smell it and it smells absolutely wonderful. But yeah, I do not get that from the other Ambroxide materials that I have. But who knows? Maybe it's me. Okay, next up, we are moving. Now we have 4 more groups we're going to do. We're going to move into the floral / fruity materials. I don't just want to do the floral. First of all, how do you draw a line between what is what? Yeah, how do you draw a line? If I do floral, let's do this, floral. I'll do a quick rearranging. I'm going to do florals, and then we're going to do fruities. Let me update my strip here. We're going to do fruit. And interestingly, the Divana and the Osmanthus are going in the fruity category. They're not going to be in the floral. Okay, let's start with the true floral note, phenyl ethyl alcohol. This is the meat and potatoes inside of the rose. This is the thick, rich, yet at the same time, somewhat transparent rose note. This is the body. It feels full in my nose. In phenyl ethyl alcohol, I also get this with cis-3-hexanol. There's a feeling in my nose that it goes beyond smell. I guess for most fragrances, I associate the smell also with pitch and with the feeling that's going on, not just with the smell, but with phenyl ethyl alcohol. To me, it's encompassing, it's broad, it's large, and at the same time, it's spacious. I can see through it, and it's rosy. Now let's complement that phenyl ethyl alcohol with a little bit of citronyl acetate. Interesting that we're not using just citronellol, but citrononyl acetate. This is a top note. And it's a lot like citronellol, but to me it's a bit more green, funny enough. Maybe a bit more waxy almost, but I think green is the best way to put it. Citronellol is fuzzy, it's zingy, it's also floral, but it's very narrow and it's straightforward and it's got a lot of vibration to it. And citrononyl acetate, it's just a little bit more flat, a little bit more broad, maybe a touch more high-pitched. And it's just got a green color to it. Next up, dimethyl benzyl carbonal butyrate. I shorten this to DMBCB. I don't know if other people do that, but dimethyl benzyl carbonal butyrate is just a little, it's kind of a mouthful. I like DMBCB. Now, this is also floral, but this starts taking us in the fruity direction. There's about 2 drops in here. Do I need more? I need a little more. Let's see what we got. Yeah, that'll do it. Okay. Okay, we have 2 more. We have just a little Ionone beta and methyl Ionone in the form of Aalia. Let's start with Ionone beta. Ooh, stuff is strong. Strong, strong, strong. Lovely violet orris note with just hints of a woodiness. But it's very pingy. When I smell Ionones, I think of a sonar where it's crisp, pure ping. It just shoots right in the nose. And the way that it mixes with the other floral notes here is it just takes it up a notch. It's like you're not turning up the volume, but you're taking a certain frequency and you're making it a little stronger. It's just so it shines in the mix a little bit better. Next up, Aalia. I'm using Aalia Total. This is similar to my nose as Ionone beta, but it's more powdery. It's a little more sweet. That ping, while still there, is more like a bong. It's a little bit whiter, it's a little bit fuller, and it's just a touch more lower pitched. But it works so well with other floral notes. All right. When I dip, you dip, we dip. All right. Florals. Next up, we got 5 to go in the fruity category. And we are going to start with the most fruity of fruits, Damascenone. Damascenone is a dark fruit. Dark, ripe plum. Ripe apple. Dark cherry. Maybe less cherry now that I'm thinking about it. But that dark plum, I think we got it. Yep. Dark plum, dark apple. Yeah. And it's very strong. If you were to put even 1% of the concentrate in Damascenone, that's a bold overdose. This is IFRA restricted at 0.043% of the final concentrate. So I doubt you could even put in 1%. You might be able to put in 1% in an eau de cologne where you have a 4.3% concentration in the final product. But anyways, let's stop doing math. Let's do more perfumery. Next up, Verdox. Now, if you have a fragrance that has an apple note, likely you've got some Verdox in here, also known as green acetate, also known as Agrumex. All right, almost 4% of the concentrate is in Verdox, just about half of a gram. And what I like about Verdox is it does have that appley quality, but there is a green aspect to it. More of a leafy green aspect to it. Where if you were to take Manzanate, that's got an apple skin, but really ripe, fruity apple vibe. Next up, I think it's pronounced Phenyrate, even though it does not have an E at the end of it. It's a Symrise product. You could also call it phenoxyethyl isobutyrate from IFF. Now this is kind of a floral. It's a fruity. It's sweet like honey. It's delicate. It's very long lasting. It's really nice. It's super mellow. It is super mellow. And there's not much in here. There is not much. This is one of those materials where I'm just not going to be able to smell this in a blend. Perhaps this is part of a unique floral accord. Perhaps, I don't know. So maybe you could smell the effect of this if you were just looking at the floral accord that we were building. But yeah, that's a tough one. It's beautiful on its own, but it is very subtle. Okay, we're going to do two more, the fun ones, Osmanthus and Divana. Now I have Osmanthus Absolute. This is from China. Not going to use much. This is strong. It's floral, but it is fruity. And it's hard to pin down what kind of fruity this is because it's almost like it wants to go into a terpenic pink pepper direction, or whatever is in this is also in Cassis Absolute. Because Cassis Absolute, this reminds me when I walk into a Chinese restaurant or a Vietnamese restaurant and I smell flowers, but I also smell sauce. I also smell food. It's like there's umami hiding in here. Ooh, look at that color. I'm not going to be able to put this in here because there's barely even a drop in here. Yeah, that's going to be enough, I think. Yeah. It smells so good. Interestingly, I remember smelling this in a tea I once purchased in Seattle. And then I went on to learn they use Osmanthus occasionally to fragrance to what's the word? What's the verb to make something fragrant? They fragrance teas, is that correct? I don't know if that's correct. Someone help me. I might need more coffee. Anyways, it's used to fragrance teas, and but that clicked once I learned that. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember smelling that. Also, fun fact, it takes 3,000 kilos of Osmanthus flowers to make 1 kilo of Osmanthus Absolute. Next up, let's do our Divana. Now there's more Divana in here than there was Osmanthus Absolute. Divana, I think, is in the Artemisia. It's not family. I don't remember biology. It's Artemisia pallens is the botanical name. So it's related to wormwood, though it doesn't smell like wormwood. The best way I would describe Divana is lychee or lychee liqueur. That's what I get. It's floral, but it's intensely fruity. It's got a sweet, almost raunchy animalic undertone I'm sorry, it is very sweet, but it has an animalic and almost raunchy undertone. It's as if that same umami that is fighting to be heard in the osmanthus also exists here in Davana. And this is a beautiful, it's a beautiful material. Absolutely beautiful. My buddy Trill Noel reminded me that I had this and I have to smell this more and I have to work with it. Yeah, and he's right. It smells good. Absolutely smells good. Okay, what we're gonna do next, let's shake, rattle, and roll. Okay. Remember, when I dip, you dip. We dip. And then I'm gonna add more solvent. Now, one thing today that I'm doing that I don't usually do, when I am looking at a formula for the concentrate, remember, in the concentrate, there is no ethanol. If you need a solvent to dissolve any solids, you're using triethyl citrate, you're using dipropylene glycol, isopropyl myristate, you're using diethyl phthalate, you're using things that are not ethanol. Usually what I will do when I am making a batch using pre-diluted materials, I remove all that. I remove the DPG, I remove the TEC, and I just say, yeah, I'll use my diluted materials. That will work as the solvent. The ethanol in the materials will work as the solvent. Now, maybe that has an effect on the final fragrance. I'm kind of testing that out. So what I've done is I've actually reintroduced the dipropylene glycol that was in the original formula. I'm not going to put the stuff on the screen as far as what I'm adding, but I'm going to add in about 0.5 gram of dipropylene glycol, and I'm going to add in a little bit more perfumer's alcohol so that when we're all done with this, we will be at our 17.7% concentrate. And again, we chose that number because that keeps this formula as concentrated as it can get while still being IFRA compliant. And though we may not agree with IFRA, it's probably important to stay compliant. What am I looking for? Alcohol. That's right. Booze. No, not booze. Don't drink this ever. You might die. Or it'll just taste really bad. Okay, perfumer's alcohol. I need 0.64 grams. And then we'll keep trucking. Okay, there we go. Whew. Okay. We have 2 more groups that we're going to add. And finally, I want to make a comment about IFRA compliance. You may disagree with IFRA. And in fact, we can complain all we want about regulation. The last thing the industry wants or needs is legislators who know nothing about the industry regulating that industry. I realize there's regulatory capture. There's a whole, yeah, sure, we can argue for days about that. But it's better to be hard on ourselves. It's better to be harder on ourselves than have someone who does not know what's going on to be not only hard on us, but unreasonable. So, there it is. I said it. I said it. Because I know I really dislike not being able to use musk ambret or musk xylene. You know, neurotoxicity aside, they smell really good. And you know what? You only live once. So I'm half kidding. I'm half kidding. They do smell good. But probably it's probably best to just work together, be on the same team on this one. What am I doing? I have cognac oil, white cognac oil. This is interesting stuff. This is another ingredient I'm building into my boozy fragrance with the Whisky lactone, and it's dirty. It's boozy, like boozy. It smells like booze. It smells like alcohol. And maybe not just cognac, but there's like an herbal, waxy, herbal note to this that's really interesting. Now, in the fragrance I'm building, I'm using green cognac. It's just a little bit different. But what an interesting material. Next up, we have cinnamaldehyde or cinnamic aldehyde. This stuff is strong. I have it at a 1% dilution here. It's kind of similar, to the cinnamic alcohol, except rather than a rich, deep vibe to it, it's got more of that aldehydic, waxy hiss to it. It's like you have this wonderful balsamic, deep, rich, smooth balsamic note that it just has it's overlaid with white noise. Just a nice and warm right on top of it. Whereas the cinnamic alcohol is a nice hum. Okay, eugenol. Last but not least, eugenol. Probably just a drop. Eugenol is great. It just warms it up. In small amounts, it really, really warms things up. Gives it just a little bit of heat. It's really a beautiful, beautiful material. Okay. So these are our herbs and spices. Even though we didn't really add herbs, we didn't add thyme or tarragon or basil, anything like that. We just added our white cognac, which has a herbality to it. Finally, we're going to add our top notes. Now here, there's a lot of top notes. I was going to put the linalool and linalool acetate in a different group, but you know what? There's bergamot in here, and come on, they're in bergamot. Let's just put them all together. We have a little bit of citron, and then the wonderful helional and hedione is what we will finish off with. So let's add our bergamot. Any bergamot will do. Preferably bergaptine free to help prevent skin damage if you put this on and go out in the sun. But if you don't have bergaptine free bergamot, maybe just don't go into, just be wary of UV exposure. When you're building a formula, it's hard to overdo the bergamot. And it's actually easy to underdo. You might think, oh, I just want a little of this. Well, you have to put in a lot of bergamot. Okay. Let's beef up this bergamot. We're going to add in our linalool acetate and our linalool. Oh, it's almost time to make a new dilution of linalool acetate. Linalool acetate. The reference for linalool acetate is linalool. Linalool is floral, fresh, it's light, it's a little bit fruity, it's wonderful. Linalool acetate is very similar, but it's a little bit darker, a little bit sweeter. The metallic tone of it, because linalool is metallic, meaning there's this zing to it. There's this metal edge. There's a metallic, it's just a metal edge to the smell. Like when you put a 9-volt battery on your tongue. It's kind of like that, just in your nose. Don't ask me how I know. All right. Interesting that linalool acetate and linalool are separate line items here. Especially given the ratio of these two, there's 2 times the linalool acetate as there is linalool. you know, I think if I remember correctly, that's pretty close to what the ratio is in bergamot. Maybe it's because there's not any more limonene. We ran out of space for limonene. All the limonene in the GCMS was taken up by the current bergamot. So, you know, you just add a little bit of extra. Citral. Citral is next. Now, I really like Citral. It's a citrus note, but it's a little dark. It's fuzzy. It reminds me of if you had like a lemon pez, but that lemon pez accidentally got mixed up with the orange pez. Just a little bit darker than it, you know, than it should be. We've got two more. What am I doing? Yeah, we got two more. I'm talking too much. Let's add our Hedione. Okay. Now, oddly enough, there's not much Hedione in here. By not much, I mean there's less than 4%. And given that we live in the age of Hedione, where it is used practically like a solvent, there is so much Hedione in fragrances these days. It's just a little weird that we only got 4% Hedione in here. Hedione definitely floralizes your formula. Gives a little light, airy, jasmine-like effect. It opens it up, it gives it space, it makes it a little brighter, a little bit more sparkly. It does elevate. It elevates your fragrance. It's kind of like putting sugar in your pasta sauce or in your pizza sauce. It just tastes a little better. Don't judge me. Last, not least, the very beautiful, very elegant Helional. I really appreciate what Helional does. Helional is like Calone's very, very, very small, but very interesting sister. Or little sister. Not small sister, little sister. Little but interesting sister. There's more melon in here. There's more fruit, touch more floral, but you get that Calone-like quality that adds just that crystal clear space in the middle of the fragrance, kind of pushes everything out so you can smell around it. It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Let's shake it. This time I think we should shake it like a Polaroid picture. All right. And I have a top note here. Now remember, friends, this is fresh. This is 30 seconds old. No matter how amazing this formula is, we have two issues. Hasn't matured. We could say it needs to macerate more, but I was using mostly pre-diluted materials, so you know it's pretty macerated, except for the ISOE Super and the galaxolide and the maybe the Hedione. It's pretty macerated, okay? The ingredients are in the alcohol, but we have a maturity problem, and things smooth out and they blend as it matures. Also, there's some chemistry that goes on that I'm still trying to learn the words and understand what it means, but some chemistry does go on. Some of these molecules do change, especially if I've got this in my hot pocket. You know, if it's exposed to heat, some chemical reactions will occur. It slightly changes most of the time for the better. But let's start with our olfactive analysis. We're starting with the base. This was most of the musks, and by most I mean galaxolide, cinile. This was also our ISOE Super, all the sweet notes, vanillin, ethyl, maltol, coumarin. We also had, there was one more, pachuli. Let's smell it. Very interesting that the vanilla is strong. This actually smells like a very old, when I used to have a soap business, it was called Ryan Soap. Can you believe it? I'm so creative. This smells like what the sandalwood base I would get to put in the soap. It was very vanilla forward. Yeah, it's funny. Wow, that's bringing back a scent memory, which is rare. Maybe I found the formula for that sandalwood base, but It's very vanilla. The ethyl maltol is actually coming through, which is interesting because I don't think there was much ethyl maltol in here. Yeah, patchouli's warm. The musk gives it some body. Isoe Super is giving it some roundness. It's a nice base. It's a nice base. What am I going to say? Next up, we added the amber materials. Ambroxan, 2 kinds of Labdanum. Then we added the Muscanone, the Cashmirin, and I think that's it. Ooh, Muscanone coming in hot. There is a very interesting Play-Doh note here. Okay, mark in your minds, if you want to make a Play-Doh accord, Muscanone might be important. Yeah, this is odd. But interestingly, that Labdanum really isn't coming through. I was hoping, I love Labdanum so much, but it's not coming through a bunch. Okay, next up, the floral materials. These were the Ionones, the phenylethyl alcohol, citronelyl acetate, and then the DMB-CB. Ooh, and now we have soap. We have a nice soap. Yeah, the phenylethyl alcohol is so important in floralizing it, but without making it obviously rosy. I think we need more citronellol. I always want to say citronellol. We need more citronellol, geraniol. We need those kinds of materials to make it like really rosy. Phenylethyl alcohol floralizes it in that rose direction without just smacking you in the face and saying, hey, here's rose. But the Ionones are there, and the Ionones combined with that rosy aspect give it kind of a soap vibe. This does not smell bad. This does not smell bad, but it's interesting. It's just interesting. Next up, we added all the fruits. This includes Verdox, the Phenyrate, the Damascenone, the Osmanthus, and the Divana. Okay, and now it feels like we're moving in the Oajan direction. The Divana and the Osmanthus actually give this like a honey tone, like a honey overlay. Very interesting. Next up, Cognac I probably won't be able to smell that. And they vary a little bit of cinnamic aldehyde. Oh, I forgot. In our base, we had the cinnamic alcohol and the cinnamyl acetate. That's probably what's contributing to that low kind of waxy fuzziness that I'm smelling. Here we have the Cognac, the cinnamic aldehyde, and the eugenol. And we're getting closer to Oajan. The spices that you smell in Oajan, they're subtle, they're elegant, they're whispering at you. They're there, you can hear them, but they're whispering. And that's what it's doing here. I'm still fascinated that the honey note that I got in Oajan was probably from the Osmanthus and the Divana. And perhaps the Phenyrate, the phenoxyethyl isobutyrate. And then finally, all the tops. We had our bergamot, we had our citral, the linalool acetate. We also had our hedione and helional. So, is this Oajan? We're gonna find out. It's too soon. It's way too soon. I can still smell the hedione. It might take the hedione another couple hours to like smooth out and chill the F out, but the hedione's way too strong in here. So unfortunately, this just needs time. We're headed in the right direction. Absolutely headed in the right direction. I'm afraid I'm gonna have to leave this on kind of a cliffhanger and get back to you as to how good this is, because I just smell hedione. I will tell you we're close. Now, a quick update. If you've been with me this long, thank you. A quick update. I have tried shooting an episode reviewing all of the 42 fragrances we've done up until today, and comparing them to their originals. And I will say I've done 2 iterations now of that. It is so boring. It is so boring. For you, it will be so boring. So what I think I'm going to do is I will do some shorts. I will do, within the next few weeks, I'll start doing this, and I'll do some 1-minute shorts reviewing all of the past fragrances that we've done and comparing them to the original, seeing how they've aged, talk about quickly, mind you, because it's a short, talk about the dilutions. But I think I'm going to go that route because I'm not going to shoot round 3 of trying to review the old fragrances. It's a slog. I don't want to bore you. These are boring enough. All right. So thank you for joining me this time. And I guess be on the lookout for a short one of these days that reviews how this is aged. Because we're close. We are close, but that Hedione's got to chill out. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.